Okay. Gonna wait a little bit for people to come on. Okay, yo creo que podemos empezar ahora. Oh, I was speaking in Spanish. I'm sorry. Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to Storytime with Srta Pikukla. Sometimes when you're doing the changing languages around thing, you just like keep going in the language that you were last using, and and you forget to change. So yeah, okay. So welcome to Storytime. It's Tuesday, and the sun is coming out. So hopefully it gets warmer. And I hope that all of you are doing excellent today. And I'm going to give a shout out. Time for shout outs. I'm going to give a shout out to my student Graham today. And the reason I'm going to give a shout out to Graham is Graham is awesome. He doesn't say a lot, but when he says something, it's important. It's like important, and it's good and expressive, and he's always very polite, and always he communicates well. He's very polite, and I admire how to the point and direct that he is. So Graham, shout out to you, and let's recap on what happened. So last time we were in Prince Caspian, they all woke up from sleeping, and they're all tired, but a little bit less. I'm tired today too. They were tired, but a little bit less sore from yesterday. And they decided to go on, and they were walking in the woods, and they were debating about which way to go, and they were going that way. And C.S. Lewis is a master of words, and he was describing how the experience. If any of you have gone into the woods before, I definitely know I had this experience with one of my friends. We were in the woods. And we're like, oh yeah, we're totally on the path. We're totally on the path. Like, well, yeah, keep going. Is that the path? Or what about right there? No, this is the path. And then after a little while, you realize you've totally lost the path. and you're lost, and you're trying to find your way. And this is very much what happened to them. And then they kind of started arguing a little bit, and Trumpkin started getting worried, and they asked, like, do you even know where you're going? And Edmund said, well, yes, of course we know where we're going, because we carry maps in our heads, and that's the problem with girls. And then Lucy kind of jogged back a little bit and was like, well, we have something in our heads. And they were all kind of getting a little irritated and cross with each other. And then they're going along, and then they were saying, Trumpkin was saying, like, they were trying to find the river. And Peter was like, where is it? And Trumpkin says, well, look, there's a gorge. And just because, a long time ago it was a river to you, it's been like hundreds or thousands of years since you've been here. It could be a gorge now. A gorge is like a huge valley. Like if you've ever seen Lion King, where all the wildebeests are running, that's a gorge. And then they were going along, and they were trying to decide, and they're like, well, I sure hope we get there, because you guys are hoping for a meal from Caspian, and if we don't get there soon, Miraz is going to have wiped out everybody, and there won't be anyone there. And they're going on, and all of a sudden, Lucy saw something. She saw a lion. So let's continue. Ready? Okay. Trumpkin, you're a brick, said Peter. Come on, then, down this side of the gorge. Look, cried Lucy. Where? What? Asked everyone. The lion, said Lucy. Aslan himself. Didn't you see? Her face changed completely and her eyes shone. Do you really mean? Began Peter. Where do you think you saw him? Asked Susan. Don't talk like a grown-up, said Lucy, stamping her foot. I didn't saw him. I saw him. Where, Lou? Asked Peter. Right up there between those mountain ashes. No, this side of the gorge. And up, not down. Just the opposite of the way you want to go. He wanted us to go where he was, up there. How do you know that that's what he wanted? Asked Edmund. I don't know. I just know, said Lucy, by his face. The others all looked at each other in a puzzled silence. Her Majesty may well have seen a lion, put in Trumpkin. There are lions in these woods, I've been told, but it needn't have been a friendly and talking lion any more than the bear was friendly. It was a friendly and talking bear. Oh, don't be so silly, said Lucy. Do you think I don't know Aslan when I see him? He'd be a pretty elderly lion by now, said Trumpkin, if he's one you knew when you were here before. And if it could be the same one, what's to prevent him from having gone wild and witless like so many others? Lucy turned crimson red, and I think she would have flown at Trumpkin if Peter had not laid his hand on her arm. The DLF doesn't understand, okay? How could he? You must just take it, Trumpkin, that we do really know about Aslan, a little bit about him, I mean. And you mustn't talk about him like that ever again. It isn't lucky for one thing, and it's all nonsense for another. The only question is whether Aslan was really there. But I know he was, said Lucy, her eyes filling with tears. Yes, Lou, but we don't, you see, said Peter. There's nothing for it but a vote, said Edmund. All right, replied Peter. You're the eldest, DLF. What do you vote for, up or down? Down, said the dwarf. I know nothing about Aslan, but I do know that if we turn left and follow the gorge, it might lead us all day before we found a place where we could cross it. Whereas if we turn right and go down, we're bound to reach the great river in a couple of hours. And if there are any real lions about, we want to go away from them, not towards them. What do you say, Susan? Don't be angry, Lou, said Susan, but I do think we should go down. I'm dead tired. Do let's get out of this wretched wood into the open as quick as we can, and none of us except you saw anything. Edmund, said Peter. Well, there's just this, said Edmund, speaking quickly and turning a little red. When we first discovered Narnia a year ago, or 1,000 years ago, whichever we're talking about, it was Lucy who was discovered it first, and none of us would believe her then. I was the worst of the lot, you know. Yet she was right after all. Wouldn't it be fair to believe her this time? I'm voting that we go up. Oh, Edmund, said Lucy, and seizing his hand. And now it's your turn, Peter, said Susan. And I do hope. Oh, stop, let us chap think, said Peter. I'd much rather not have to vote. You're the High King, said the Trumpkin sternly. Down, said Peter after a long pause. I know Lucy may be right after all, but I can't help it. We must do one or the other. So they set off to their right along the edge, downstream, and Lucy came last of the party, crying bitterly. Chapter 10. The Return of the Lion. To keep along the edge of the gorge was not so easy as it had looked. Before they had gone many yards, they were confronted with young fir woods growing on the very edge, and after they had tried to go through these, stooping and pushing for about 10 minutes, I'm sorry, I lost my spot. 10 minutes, they realized that in there, it would take them an hour to do half a mile. So they came back and out again and decided to go around the fir wood. This took them much farther to their right than they wanted to go, far out of sight of the cliffs and out of sound of the river, till they began to be afraid that they had lost it altogether. Nobody knew the time, but it was getting to the hottest part of the day. When they were able at last to go back to the edge of the gorge, nearly a mile below the point from which they had started, they found the cliffs on their side of it a good deal lower and more broken. Soon they found a way down into the gorge and continued their journey at the river's edge. But they had a rest and a long drink. No one was talking any more about breakfast or even dinner with Caspian. They may have been wise to stick to the rush instead of going along the top. It kept them sure of their direction, and ever since the fir wood, they had been all afraid of being forced too far out of their course and losing themselves in the wood. It was an old and pathless forest, and you could not keep anything like a straight course on it. Patches of hopeless brambles, fallen trees, boggy places, and dense undergrowth would be always getting in your way. But the gorge of Rush was not at all a nice place for traveling either. I mean, it was not a nice place for people in a hurry. For an afternoon ramble ending in a picnic tea would have been delightful. It had everything you could want on an occasion of that sort: rumbling waterfalls, silver cascades, deep amber-colored pools, mossy rocks, and deep moss on the banks in which you could sink over your ankles, every kind of fern, jewel-like dragonflies, sometimes a hawk overhead, and once, Peter and Trumpkin both thought, an eagle. But of course, what the children and the dwarf wanted to see as soon as possible was the great river below them in Baruna and the way to Aslan's How. As they went on, the rush began to fall more and more steeply. The journey became more and more of a climb and less of a walk. In places, even a dangerous climb over slippery rock with a nasty drop into dark chasms, and the river roaring angrily at the bottom. You may be sure they watched the cliffs on their left eagerly for any sign of a break or any place that they could climb, but those cliffs remained cruel. It was maddening because everyone knew that if once they were out of the gorge on the other side, they would only have a smooth slope and a fairly short walk to Caspian's headquarters. The boys and the dwarf were now in favor of lighting a fire and cooking their bear meat. Susan didn't want this. She only wanted, as she said, to get on and finish it and get out of these beastly woods. Lucy was far too tired and miserable to have any opinion about anything. But as there was no dry wood to be had, it mattered very little what anyone thought. The boys began to wonder if raw meat was really as nasty as they had been told. Trumpkin assured them it was. Of course, if the children had attempted a journey like this a few days ago in England, they would have been all worn out. I think I have explained before how Narnia was changing them. Even Lucy was by now, so to speak, only 1/3 of a little girl going to boarding school for the first time, and 2/3 of Queen Lucy of Narnia. At last, said Susan. Oh, hooray, said Peter. The river gorge had just made a bend, and the whole view spread out beneath them. They could see the open country stretching before them to the horizon, and between it and them, the broad silver ribbon of the great river. They could see the specially broad and shallow place which had once been the fords of Baruna, but was now spanned by a long, many-arched bridge. There was a little town at the far end of it. By Jove, said Edmund, we fought the Battle of Baruna just where that town is. This cheered the boys more than anything. You can't help feeling stronger when you look at a place where you've won a glorious victory, not entered the kingdom hundreds of years ago. Peter and Edmund were soon so busy talking about the battle that they forgot their sore feet and the heavy drag of their mail shirts on their shoulders. The dwarf was interested too. They were all getting on at a quicker pace now. The going became easier. Though they were still sheer cliffs on their left, the ground was becoming lower on their right. Soon it was no longer a gorge at all, but only a valley. There were no more waterfalls, and presently they were in fairly thick woods again. Then all at once, whiz, and a sound rather like the stroke of a woodpecker. The children were still wondering where, ages ago, they had heard a sound just like that and why they disliked it so, when Trumpkin shouted, "Down!" and at the same moment forcing Lucy, who happened to be next to him, flat down into the bracken. Peter, who had been looking up to see if he could spot a squirrel, had seen what it was. A long, cruel arrow had sunk into a tree trunk just above his head. As he pulled Susan down and dropped himself, another came rasping over his shoulder and struck the ground at his side. Quick, quick! Crawl, panted Pumpkin. They turned and wriggled along uphill under the bracken amid clouds of horribly buzzing flies. Arrows whizzed around them. One struck Susan's helmet with a sharp ping and glanced off. They crawled quicker, sweat poured off them. Then they ran, stooping nearly double. The boys held their swords in their hands for the fear that they would trip them up. It was a heartbreaking work, all uphill again, back over the ground that they had already traveled. When they felt that they really couldn't run anymore, even to save their lives, they all dropped down in the damp moss beside a waterfall and behind a big shoulder, panting. They were surprised to see how high they had already gotten. They listened intently and heard no sound of pursuit. So that's all right, said Trumpkin, drawing a deep breath. They're not searching the wood. Only sentries, I expect. But it means that Mira has an outpost down there. Bottles and battledores, though it was a near thing. I ought to have my head smacked for bringing us all this way at all, said Peter. On the contrary, your majesty, said the dwarf. For one thing, it wasn't you, it was your royal brother, King Edmund, who first suggested going by Glasswater. I'm afraid the DLF is right, said Edmund, who had quite honestly forgotten this ever since things had been going wrong. And for another, continued Trumpkin, if we'd gone my way, we'd have walked straight into the new post, most likely, or at least had just the same trouble avoiding it. I think this Glasswater route has turned out for the best. A blessing in disguise, said Susan. Some disguise, said Edmund. Well, I suppose we'll have to go right up the gorge again now, said Lucy. Lou, you're a hero, said Peter. That's the nearest you've been to saying I told you today that you've been saying I told you so. Let's go on. And as soon as we're well up into the forest, said Trumpkin, whatever anyone says, I'm going to light a fire and cook supper, but we must get well away from here. There is no need to describe how they toiled back up the gorge. It was pretty hard work, but oddly enough, everyone felt more cheerful. They were getting their second wind, and the word supper had a wonderful effect. And we're going to stop there for today. And thank you for watching. And I hope that you have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you next time.